some challenges to our emotional happiness and well-being, whether it's stress, whether it's guilt, whether it's shame, whether it's worry about the future, whether it's worry about the past, whether it's worry about the present. Wherever these negative emotions might come from, we are going to explore them and to provide ancient, classic, time-tested, true methods for dealing with them based on Jewish wisdom. Okay, so before we jump into kind of develop the topic in a more substantial way, I want to make the following obvious point, and that is, it would be great if we had a button that we could press to solve all the problems, right? It would be great if we had a button to press that could solve all of the stuff that I would say on the outside that is stressing us out in order to live a little bit more stress-free. So for example, if the concern is about health, so it would be great if we could hit a button and solve all that. If the concern is about finances, it would be great if we could hit a button and solve that. If the concern is about family, about mishpacha, about nachas, about children, grandchildren, whatever it is, it would be great if we could hit a button and take care of that. If the concern or if the stress is about the past, it would be great to hit a button and fix that. If it's about the future, you guessed it, it would be great if there was a button to fix that. But the reality is that such a button does not exist yet. Not that we're going to create it in this course either, but such a button just simply does not exist because there's a limit to what we can accomplish. There's a limit to what we can actually do. And, there's a limit to, not what we can accomplish, there's a limit to how much control we have over the external stuff. So the premise of this course is the following, and that's why I need to state this right here kind of in the intro. The premise of this series is that you and I cannot necessarily control, not necessarily, you and I cannot control what's happening outside of us. Fundamentally, what we can control is what's happening inside of us. That is the choice that we have. Recently, about a week and a half ago, so I had the opportunity, apologies, little seltzer, l'chaim. Okay, I had the opportunity about a week and a half ago, and some of you joined me. We had a Zoom event with a Holocaust survivor, a clinical psychologist, and an author, all the same person. Her name is Dr. Edith Eger. She wrote a book called The Choice, and it's an incredible book. And she writes about how when they were on the way to, she grew up in Poland, and when they were on their way they grew up in Hungary, and when they were on their way to the concentration camp to Auschwitz, so her mother turns to her, they were in the cattle car, her mother turns to her, and shortly before, everyone got off, and whatever she says, they can take everything from you, except for one thing. Whatever you keep in your mind locked away, that no one can take from you. And for her, the way she expresses it in the book and the way she shared it about a week and a half ago on our Zoom event, the way she described it is that helped her get through some of the most difficult times, knowing that no matter what happens to her body, no matter what happens, what another human being or other human beings might do to her, she could choose to be in control over the way she feels, over the way she reacts, over the way she thinks. What's inside of her, no one can take away unless a person gives that away to the other person to be in control of. Now, I don't mean to oversimplify it, because obviously it's very difficult, profoundly difficult. But I'm sharing this because this is a story that happened with somebody, and she's saying how this was radically beneficial to helping her get through the most difficult of horrors. And on a much smaller level, I would say, although not to judge, right? We all have our stresses and our challenges. In our own way, I think this type of mindset can help us through it, and that is, we don't have control over what might happen outside of us, right? What's going to happen with corona, with vaccine? You and I, unless you're working for one of these pharmaceutical companies or the government or whatever it is, you and I might not have control over that, but we have control over this. And when I say this, I mean what's going on inside our hearts and what's going on inside our heads. And so it's really important, especially in times like these, to be a master ninja, to make sure that, when I say ninja, I don't mean like necessarily kung fu, but what I mean is that we're in control over our mind and over our hearts, because that will literally make the difference between, feeling out of control or feeling in control, negative feelings or positive feelings. Let's take a look. I'm going to share the first text that we're going to explore inside. Let me share my screen with you, and please confirm that you can see it when I've shared it. Can you guys see that? Thumbs up if you can. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, here we go. Text 1. This is an insight, actually a letter that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, wrote to someone about perspective on life. So powerful. I'm going to read it. In our world, everything is a mixture of good and bad. By the way, what that means is life has both good and bad, right? Life, some good, some bad, and some mixed together. Human beings must choose which aspects they will emphasize, contemplate, and pursue. For in each person's life, there are two possible approaches: to see the good that surrounds us, or the opposite. It is instructive that our sages tell us that Adam, of Adam and Eve fame, right, that Adam was an ingrate. Even before he was banished from the Garden of Eden, where he lived in a literal paradise, he complained about his circumstances. He must have been Jewish, because apparently he was doing a lot of kvetching. And Jews definitely know how to kvetch, how to complain. But anyway, so Adam complained about his circumstances. He's in paradise and he's complaining. Conversely, there were Jewish men and women who thanked and blessed the Creator and recited the morning blessings while living through the most horrifying times in the German concentration camps. Ultimately, each individual's circumstances will lie somewhere between these two extremes. I think I'm just interjecting my own commentary here. I think that's a very, very important point to mention, right? In between the Garden of Eden of Adam and Eve and the German concentration camps is probably somewhere in the middle of that is where we are, right? With our good days and our bad days and our opportunities and our challenges and this good thing and that bad thing. So we're in between somewhere. It's not the perfect perfection of the Garden of Eden. It's not the horrific horror of the concentration camps either. It's somewhere in the middle. The point of this letter, the point that the Rebbe is trying to bring out, is that each of us, we have either the good or we have good and bad. The question is, what are we focusing on? Needless to say, my intention is not to imply that anyone deserves suffering, God forbid. My point is simply to underscore the reality. The type of lives that we live, whether full of satisfaction and meaning or the opposite, depends in large measure on our choice, which dictates whether we will focus on the positive or on the negative. By the way, I think it dovetails perfectly with what I mentioned before about Dr. Edith Eger. Her book, her best-selling book, is called The Choice. And she literally, the whole premise of her book is that she felt throughout her life that she has had the choice as to how to see things, how to react, how to be, what to let go, what to give up, what to hold on to, and that choice is necessary, is intrinsic to our state of being and to how we will feel. And so in this letter, the Rebbe says basically the same thing, and that is that we all have good and bad. What we choose to focus on, what we choose to, live with, will dictate our reality. And you could say it's as basic as glass half full, glass half empty. It's kind of an optimistic view or a pessimistic view, but I think it's more than that. It's not as simplistic as that. It's really like this. It's really it's not glossing over the negative. It's understanding, yes, there are negative, there are challenges, etc. But I know that my well-being, my inner well-being, is more valuable, right, than the negative stuff. I value my emotional state more than anything else, and therefore I will fiercely choose, to be very careful as to what I focus on, to what I put my mind to, knowing that that's going to fundamentally affect the way I feel. Just to state something very important along these lines that Judaism develops, and if you've been in any of my classes before, I'm sure this has come up once or twice. Judaism believes, and Kabbalah talks about this at length, that the mind always dictates the mood of the heart. In other words, what we're thinking about, what we're focusing on in our minds, what we're concentrating on, what we're meditating on, so to speak, is going to influence how we feel. It's a natural extension. It's not like, a supernatural thing, like think this and you'll feel that magic. It's not magic. It's whatever we're focused on is producing a feeling. In Kabbalah, we call this meditation. Meditation is not, there's different types of meditation. There's Eastern meditation, which is about clearing the mind. Jewish meditation or Jewish mystical meditation is actually not about clearing the mind, but it's about filling the mind with focal points, with ideas to think about. And with the intention that when you think about something long enough and hard enough, you're going to produce an emotion that is commensurate to that thought. Example that I've used before, again, you may have heard me say this before, but I think it's an important example at this point in the class. You're driving down the street one day, and you're thinking about what happened a month ago, when you were speaking to your friend, and they said something, and it was maybe slightly offensive, but you weren't sure, but now that you think about it, now you realize, it was offensive, and now you're getting all upset about it. And they're not sitting with you in the car, they're not on the phone with you, but you feel yourself get angry, you feel your mood changing, and how is it changing? And not only that, physiologically you're changing. Maybe you're starting to sweat a little bit, maybe your face is going red, maybe you're gripping the steering wheel tighter, and why are all of these emotional and bodily changes happening? It's all in the head. It's all in the head. What are you thinking about? You're replaying a conversation, and then you're adding on to the story. You're saying, oh, I bet they meant that, and of course they meant that, and that's why that happened, and now it all makes sense, and you start to put together puzzle pieces and whatever. Meanwhile, what's happening is that we're using the mind the mind is focusing on something, and because it's focused on something, it's necessarily automatically producing an emotion and also a physiological response as well. And that's a truth. It's a truth in our lives. It's a truth in science. We know this to be true. And Kabbalah, Jewish teachings also teach this to be true. That the way we think will dictate the way we feel and the way we are. So here's a simple formula. If we wish to worry less, if we wish to stress less, if we wish to get rid of or push away what we would call negative emotions, it all begins in the head. It all begins on how we think. So this course, fundamental, over the next 6 sessions total, I think we have 6 sessions. Yeah, so we confirmed 6 sessions here? Okay, good.
Yes.
Over the next 6 sessions, so we are going to explore one negative emotion after the next negative emotion, a few things. Number one, where they come from, what's at the source of the thinking behind the negative emotion, and how we can switch our thinking to get to a better place. Okay, first let's explore now, or not first, but now let's explore some negative emotions. So I want to give you a bit of a collection of negative emotions. Let's define negative emotions. This is coming from a book that has a long title. Actually, not that long. The Functional Utility of Negative Emotions. It actually may be in a journal, I don't know. It's in something called The Wisdom and Feeling, Psychological Processes in Emotional Intelligence. Okay, sounds very good. Now, let's jump in. Negative emotions, such as fear, sadness, shame, anger, contempt, guilt, disgust, anxiety, disappointment, embarrassment, loneliness, envy, and hatred. Wow, what a list. Share the property of involving an appraisal that something is wrong. One's well-being is threatened, one's goals have to be abandoned, one lacks what one desires, one views oneself as wrong or as not projecting the desired appearance to others, and so on. So what he's saying here is, let me make sure it's a he, if I was correct. Yeah. So what he's saying here is that negative emotions are fundamentally coming from a perspective that something is wrong. Okay. In contrast, positive emotions, happiness, gratitude, pride, love, relief, hope, and so on, involve appraisals that one is meeting one's goals, that a bad event has not come to pass, that one is meeting or exceeding one's own standards, that one's relationship with another is secure, and so on. In other words, they are driven by a perspective that things are either good or at least not so bad. Could be worse, right? Not so bad. So what's the point here? Once again, where are emotions coming from? Emotions are coming from the head. They're coming from a perspective, an appraisal. In the language of this text, it's coming from an appraisal. Either the appraisal that something is wrong, which leads to a negative feeling, or an appraisal that something is good, meeting our goals, right? Here's the positive appraisal. So it's either negative or positive appraisal, which is a perspective up here that then dictates how we feel. So you want